All right. Hi, everybody. Hey, Ken, how you doing? And hi, Barry. Welcome. Deep Dives in the Desert. We're very,
Doing
very happy to have Barry back. He's
Yeah.
yeah, not only someone that we come to know, but really someone we regard as a friend and a confidant now. We've all had some sessions with him, but
Yeah.
and he really helped us out. Not only me, but he had almost everyone in my
In our
family.
families, right? Yeah.
That's cool.
We,
Thank you very much for that.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
we're so happy to see you again. And hi, Victoria. How are you?
Hey, Victoria. So, Barry, what have you been up to?
Greetings to everybody in chat too. I've been kind of just hanging low a bit, observing things. I mean, it seems like things are very turbulent in the world, in the community that we all three deal with, and I just kind of just watching things, kind of
Mhm.
hanging low. It's interesting times to say the least.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's definitely interesting, and it's actually it can get a little challenging, and it's really important to have that person that you could kind of bounce off of, or at least have the wherewithal within yourself to make sure you're staying grounded and doing the things you need to do to stay, in a positive mind frame. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a lot, and we've talked, a couple of times, but I think for me, just watching how things are unfolding and what's going on with everybody. I think it's better to observe and just try to stay neutral, but it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to be neutral. That was one of the themes that I wanted to talk to you about today,
Yeah.
because it's, when discernment is so important, and you have talked about that for years. Having discernment in this age of contact, and the people that are speaking and things like that. What do you have to say about that?
Wow, that was heavy. You went there.
I always do.
That's cool. I will say this. I'm seeing a lot of division when it comes to contact, when it comes to what people are calling out quote unquote disclosure, and these things that are really conscious events. And I think that all that is a really an attempt to separate the truth from coming forward. As long as like the communities we deal with keep being petty and having these and I found myself recently getting drawn into that, the arguing with somebody and going back and forth. I mean, that's when I realized, whoa, I'm getting drawn in too. And
Yeah.
that's certain negative inorganic beings that are locking us in through these people that have been bit by the fame bug, and they need likes, give me views. I mean, that is like that's more that's more important than the truth and popularity contests rather than actually disseminating good, legit information. So I think that's something that where the discernment really, really comes in. And there's sometimes people say, well, it doesn't matter where you get the messenger doesn't matter, it's just a message. Yes, it does matter,
Mhm.
because that can be tainted with negative energy, negative viewpoints. And right now is a point to where, I mean, this, I don't say this, but I mean, well, it's the truth. We all know it. I mean, Earth is in trouble right now. It's been in trouble. But right
Yeah.
now, with the things that are going on this planet with humanity, we're in trouble. And I always worried that we're on that timeline that is one of nuclear war. It comes up again and again, and destruction of our planet, which is, I'm sure, has happened before. I've had contact my entire life. And the younger I was, the more I used to ask, what's going to happen? What's going to happen in the
Mhm.
future? And I would never, they never say anything, never tell me anything as far as that is, and it made me think they didn't know much more than I did. Whether it's separate timelines, I don't know, but they said they would tell me this telepathically. They show me something, but this will never happen again. And I see the Earth. The planets don't really orbit the way they orbit different, but I'm seeing Earth. It looks like basically a type of a burned out cinder floating
Mm,
around the Earth. They're around orbiting around the sun, and they're telling me
really?
that's never going to happen again. And,
Oh
it
wow.
made me really start evaluating how truly old is Earth, and how much has truly happened here, as far as the epics. These
Yeah.
different epics. In a time to, like, for example, a time when there were giants here that were 25 and up living on this planet and having these civilizations and these beings that were built more. I know Zechariah Sitchin bases everything on, oh, they were here to mine gold, have people, they were Homo sapien to mine gold, and that's become like a religion.
Mm-hmm.
In reality, when you look at gold in the even our solar system, it's not a rare thing. Okay, so I mean, it's to a point to where you have these beings that have bodies or blood that is more of what we would call, ornamus type of gold as for blood. And when you start dealing with beings that size, cities on that planet, on this planet that size, and when you start looking at maybe what was their sanitation systems and how some of those might possibly be mineral deposits now, precious mineral deposits. When you start dealing with species like that weren't here, that were here, and all that stuff is buried now, and it's coming up more and more. You look even at the Vedas. They talk about these huge beings that are 25 and plus, and I think that's something that we're getting away from a little bit now, and it's just food for thought again.
Yeah, and Gary, what I found very interesting about you is when you started to have contact where, like you were just saying, when you were very young, you're talking about 7 years old, younger, right? I mean, you're talking about when you were young, you started that, right?
Yeah. Weird stuff started happening when I was 5, but when I was 7, I mean, things get, the younger you are, the weirder they are and fuzzy, but at 7, things really ramped up for me to a point of where it was, things like not waking up at home or being aboard these ships or seeing craft, you know what I mean? And seeing beings having these weird dreams. And the main thing for me was the insomnia it gave me, because waking up on those craft and things, or waking up in a room where you've got things you're doing with your mind, telepathically stirring the water and moving the feather, then you stir the water, you move these little silver balls around and things like that. It was very, very real. And I was during the day feeling like I wasn't sleeping. You know what I mean? That's where the insomnia started for me. And then when I hit the 6th grade, I had something called the acid rain experience, I called it. I woke up on this ship and I was seeing these craft over this mountain range, and they're sucking up the ones, 2 of them I'm seeing out there. They're large and they're sucking up. Looks like they're pulling clouds underneath their underbellies, and they're emitting a light after that. And this insectoid that's floating over these deck plates tells me that they're having problems with the acid rain. They're trying to reverse the metals in our atmosphere. Is very dangerous for them if they come out of the crafts, and for us as well. But for them, it could be possibly terminal. Wow. And we would think kind of like when what's dangerous for another species here kind of takes us to War of the Worlds, and how maybe the bacteria would be enough to take them out. You remember that movie? Those ships are impervious to everything. And they didn't get taken out until they started coming out of the ships and wandering around, sneaking around. And then what we would call, you and I would call the microbiome cloud, which is actually our DNA and also viruses and bacteria that emit about 36 to 40 inches outside of our body. Okay, that's called the micro cloud that's around us. And sometimes it makes you wonder when people talk about they see auras, are they seeing really the electromagnetics of the person's body field of their cocoon, or are they seeing the microcloud, the micro aura they've called it too. So
Barry, what else is interesting when I was watching your videos, some people, and I think a lot of people can identify with this in different ways, but how you were saying that just if you said that you watch Star Trek, right, in your community, right, that you'd be kind of like made fun of or laughed out of it, right? Or they're like, come on, man, like, what are you talking about? I grew up, me and Lisa talk about it all the time, and where I grew up in Brooklyn, man, if you just sang two bars of a love song, you were forget about the what you'd go through. I can't imagine what going through contact like you went through if you wanted to speak about it and bring it out. But do you think that is constructed on purpose so people like you that have this talent or have this gift that could do some of the things you've done from a young age? have to, you kind of feel like you have to be bottled up and you can't share it? I mean, now you can, but do you think it's on purpose?
Well, I think for some, for me, I thought I was having all these experiences, but it seemed like I was chasing after the information and chasing after the experiences and trying to figure them out. But the truth is, the knowledge and information was chasing me. And I think that's for a lot of us. And I was convinced that I'm not, it just didn't just happen to me. I'm not special like that, And I think that, a lot of people are having contact. I had a theory that like maybe 70% of our population or more, 80 was even having contact, and it happens in the dreamscape in a way that we're unaware of it. Okay. And to this date, I've been given enough of a platform to where I've got to talk to a lot of other contactees, and I've seen nothing that ruins that idea at all. But for me personally, you were talking to the king of hiding. I wouldn't tell nobody. Very few people, like my brothers, my siblings are much older than me. And I have one that's had some experiences. They're different than mine, but he's had a few. And I would discuss it with them a little bit, maybe one of my best friends. And that's about it, and the person that I had several contacts with when I was starting to get older that involved missing time. But otherwise, I wouldn't tell anybody. I was the cat that was listening to Art Bell every night, even when YouTube, until I had my car accident, I was watching everybody's stuff because I was looking for things I could resonate with contact-wise, and I wasn't finding it. Especially because, name one, the beings I've interacted with weren't being represented by anyone else I'd seen. Number two, I didn't see any contactees that looked like me, except for Barney Hill. He didn't have the best time. You know what I mean? And then number three would be there were never any extraterrestrials that look like me. Do they all look like Christy Brinkley? Do they all look like Fabio? Do they all look like Kevin Sorbo as Hercules? I mean,
Yeah.
So it's things like that that made me really stay quiet, though. And I was now look, I talked to big game. Oh, I'm gonna come forward one day. Yeah, right. That was just talk. You know what I mean? And then I have this car accident, which I die, and that threw a whole nother thing into my experiences, especially interacting with what the different names for what we call angelics. I think even the name angels doesn't really deal with some of these light beings and higher beings, but this book has a type of angel that they call Supranaphim, Naphim, and I'm convinced that that's what I had saw when I died. And these are a type of angels that are not archangels, but they're like at that level, but they're different. Okay. And I saw these beings like that, and these weren't corporeal beings. Okay, there were these like strands of light, like hundreds of them. Okay, and then outside of that, like you mentioned, I like Star Trek, but outside of those shields, like looked like these shields that were containing the light. Okay, then out so the light only came to that level, and then outside of that, it looked a lot like me, like you know when you've seen like the mirage of water on the road, the steam you see coming off of it. It looked like that outside of their shields. Yeah.
Yes.
And only word I can give to you is these beings were regal. Okay, and I'm convinced. I never felt, except for the Prime Creator, pure love like that. And I'm sure they were containing it, or I think it might have burned up my body or restricting it in some way. And, and just to say for something, for instance, people that talk about healing a lot, sometimes I get irritated. Like, look, my accident, I don't need to hear about healing from other people, with all due respect, because I had taken 4 catastrophic traumatic brain injuries. I had a hematoma to the frontal lobe, hematoma to the brainstem, hematoma to the quarter lobe, and I had what's called DFA, diffusal axonal. Okay, which means when I hit, my brain turned in the case, and I had spotting of the brain. Okay, it's that's almost killed me, and caused part of the near-death experience too. Give you an example. Okay, when I was in the hospital, I had over 100 people came to see me when I was in the ICU, and odd enough, I was in a window that's like right there, so a lot of people could see me and things. And this lady that's a pretty well-known psychic in my city, and I wanted dealing up with this woman since I was like 16. And I had seen once my mother showed me all the people that signed the thing. She had signed a couple of times. And, when I remembered who I was after a point of where I woke up, at first I couldn't remember who I was. Everybody says, but I talked to you. It was still you. That was a gifted actor giving you a performance because I scrambled eggs, man. But I had what's called a clearing out, which means everything came back to me as a survivor. meaning I remember how to do mathematics, how to everything came back. Very, very blessed in that way. Okay. But I go to see her. I told her, I'm dealing with this near-death experience I had. And the fact I was lost 2 weeks of my life in a coma. And I couldn't remember who I was for about 2 weeks after that. And that's just a void in my life. No other time I had voids is when I dealt with star beings. Mm-hmm. So I went to talk to her. And she says, I was allowed to go back to see you. And I want to pray for you. And the people let me go back there. And when I walked into the door, there was this golden angel. And he's like the leader. And he told me that he's grinning, saying you were going to make a full recovery. And she said, I don't doubt the light beings because, they never lie, but the archangels, but you're in bad shape. And she said, then inside the room, there was one that was at your head. He was massaging your brain. She said, I don't know what he was doing, but he's massaging your brain. Then the other one was working on the base of your neck, the other one on the base of your tailbone, and there were 2 watching them. Okay. So she described a number of angels, more than I remembered. Before I could remember who I was, I could still see these beings in my mind's eye, these supernanofem. I could still feel them, but they weren't present anymore. All right. And anyway, point being, make this short. All right. She said that. And I find out later because I went through a period like, I just got knocked out and they drugged me, because look, I've been General Hospital fan for a long time, but one more of those shows, man, where they have the character gets knocked out, they take a major brain injury and they wake up like an episode or 2 later, they just got the little bandage right here, everything's full and cloudy, and they go, what happened? I promise you, it's not like that.
No, I know. My mom fell, and it wasn't close to yours, but my mom fell. She was unconscious for about 2 weeks after she had seen you. She's still recovering, and they're telling us that it could take up to 2 years, or she may just have a whole new baseline now. So we don't know. But
you should tell me about the angel.
Oh yeah, the angel. I'm so happy that you said that because I hear a lot of people that interact and stuff with angels, and not that everybody's got a different experience and it is what it is, but my experience with angels, the couple of times that I interacted with angels, in and around him, actually, what they looked like was a humanoid kind of being. But I told him, I said, they don't have wings. What it looked like to me was almost like electricity blowing off behind them. And I said to him, I could see why people would say it's wings because it blows back like that, but it looks like an orchid, but it kind of has like this electricity kind of thing. And it goes back. So you saying that really,
like the heat off the water.
Yeah. Oh, and the heat off I was saying it, the way that I was describing it was like, if you look at the street and it's really hot and you can see that pattern of like the heat rising off the street, that's what I saw. Yeah. So you saying what you're saying, I just feel like, yes, okay, there's somebody else.
I'll tell you, and I had when I read, I'm going through this paperwork and everything, and there was a point to where I had there's a point where they called my family and told them basically a miracle had happened, that my brain turned back in the case. And that explains what she saw, this other angel. And like I said, super nanofem almost before that word, because I think, I don't want to offend anybody in the audience, but I think the word angels and religion kind of bastardizes a lot of these beings. The ones I encountered, I don't remember getting any names. Okay, I think it's way beyond that. So they were calling themselves, David, Joshua, none of these things. These were just beings that were from the prime creator. And when I remembered who I was and then being able to actually, function again cognitively, really good, I started kind of obsessing because since my memories are still there, I can remember all my encounters. And I had that accident when I was 36. I'm having encounters my whole life before that. So that is no way two things together, But I started thinking so much, and when I witnessed these super nanofem and their beings, these kind of, I don't know what the word, regal, majestic is the only word I can use. And then I started comparing that to some of these quote unquote interdimensional, extraterrestrial, these star beings I've encountered on board craft that do not have corporeal bodies. Some of them have like, they're different containers for consciousness, like plasma or condensed light, gaseous forms, things of that nature. You see, we don't, and we think about, like, when we start talking about, we want to talk about Star Trek, like you mentioned, we talk about a multidimensional ship. What is that really like with the multidimensional crew? It's more like what I kind of said there, because you think, oh, I may go in there. Wait, you go on the bridge and there's Spock, there's Kirk, and if you remember the Star Trek that was the Star Trek cartoon, the original, you had different beings that were not human on board the bridge. You had a lion being that would take over from Lieutenant Uhura, a female lion being, and then you had also another being. I think his name was Mr. Eriks. He was some sort of a long-necked tan being. So it's just, things they couldn't do in the original show. But nonetheless, that's what you would think it would be like. But really, being on board a multidimensional ship was not like that. And some of the beings would be in these, I don't want to repeat, I've probably not said this on your show, but people have heard me talk, oh no, he's talking about those damn eggs again. But there are these eggs on board these craft, all right? See if I can find you a quick representation. Anyway, in each room there were these eggs, and I've been on board a couple of them like that. But the one when I was had this adult onset were bigger, and on the front they look like a type of a glass, all right, or some type of like really strong glass. And there's metal on the back of them, and then there are tubes that are going in this organic wall that looks almost like fungus type mushroom wall, but it's got a harder consistency to it than like a toadstool or something we would touch. Anyway, sorry, I'll start looking for that too long. But anyway, inside of these eggs were these different like lights. Some of them look like plasma. Some of them look like condensed light, gaseous, some of them. But the thing is that inside of that, each egg was a bunch of mist. And there's mist all over this craft. It's not as dense as what I can see inside the eggs, but outside there's a lot of mist like coming off the ground, and it's a smell to me. I can't talk for other contactees, but for me, it smelled a lot like Windex that place did. So you're smelling that, you're dizzy. You got these beings, some of them that are not perceivable with our visual acuity, with our visuals, but you can see the technology and the things around you, the organic nature of it, and there's not a frame of reference for it. It messes with you, even if it's not a negative contact experience. You know what I mean? Then when you get done, it's over. Some of it starts fading the further you get from the event horizons, due to, I think, the vibrational the frequency difference.
I agree. Yeah.
The further you get away, the more it starts fading, and then it leads you to like, oh no, did they wipe my mind? Oh no, did I get abducted, or was it an experience? So I don't want to put down the people. I know a lot of people had abductions, and that's a major deal, and it's horrific for a lot of people. But you've got a lot of different civilizations coming here and interacting with this planet. Some interdimensional, some multidimensional, some extraterrestrial, some from inside the Earth, which starts taking us into dimensional too. So anyway, sorry,
I think that's right, and I agree with you on and everything you say. It makes so much sense. Emma had a question back about angels, and she was asking, aren't there different types too? Just curious, how do you tell the difference? Do they have different energetic markers about angels?
Angelics, well, the ones I saw were different colors. And I mean, as far as like vibration, I was so overwhelmed by the overall love coming from each of them, and almost felt collective in that way. And it's interesting because when you think about love, of course, here as humans, we have bad relationships and love hurts in that way. But pure, like, prime creator love, that might be painful. And I think it is to a degree. And some of that we can only process so much. So that's one way. And the way I would be able to say, that's how I could tell them different for, per se, the extraterrestrials I've encountered that did not have bodies. Okay. Now, some of them had a high frequency, high vibration too. Okay. To a point to where I can see how in the past, in a more primitive human civilization, being in the biofield of some of these non-humans, what gives you what the gurus called Shaktipat, which is where, you know, the Swami would touch the apprentice and release all their chakras and the Kundalini explode. Shaktipat. And it's like a temporary enlightenment, euphoria, enlightenment. Being in the presence of some of these non-humans in their biofield can make you feel like that because it's a different vibration, a different speed, a different intensity, you know, and that's like I say. So I would say that the light, these light plasma type beings I've encountered on craft, they're going for the same thing, I think, which is prime God consciousness, but they're not at the level that these super nanofin were. Does that make sense? Hope that answers your question, Emma.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think there's a lot of people that are talking about how you are literally look like you're kind of glowing right now. Talking about it in the chat.
Probably because I came out there, probably sweat, man. It's cool in here, but outside it's been getting hot.
You're funny. You know, speaking of like the plasma stuff, you had been talking about plasma and orgone energy and things like that. What do you think the purpose? What is the difference? You know, is plasma more going to be like a consciousness and orgone going to be more of a technology?
You know, to my understanding, the orgone is more of a life energy, actually. And, you know, Wilhelm Reich had based that on what the orgasm and things. Then after that, he went into the bion experiments, SAPA bions, which are from sand, like these sand packets and things. He was getting these bions and seeing how they responded to cancerous cells and things. But, you know, the thing, to my knowledge, right, what I've witnessed on board a lot of these craft here, I'm sorry, I'm just going to get this because it will explain so much more of what you're saying. I've seen an engine, okay, that I used to call it an engine, but I kind of think maybe it's actually a brain. Okay, here's the craft. You can see that has the texture on it, but then you see the eggs. Those eggs there and the lights in there. Okay, so that's what I was trying to refer to there. Sorry, sometimes my explanations may lack luster of the images themselves. Poor lady that made all these sketches for me, God knows she's very patient because I was quite meticulous. That is before everybody got the AI programs now that make it a lot easier. Here's another part of that craft. And in the corner, you can see another one of those eggs.
Oh, yeah.
Smaller. But anyway, sorry, I'll get to what you were just asking, Lisa. As far as some of these craft, they run on something that is quite similar to orgone, as in its life energy. We could call it prana, we could call it chi. And sometimes you have a situation where these craft are being fueled by some of the beings that are, you know, actually given their kundalini, their life energy to fuel this craft, as well as like, for example, sometimes when if you study UFOs a little bit, or USOs, you had some people that have commented how they see USOs going like that over the water, or even some people I've talked to that say they've been over their pool and they see them doing this. What they're doing is pulling up that orgone, that life energy from the water, and then using it to release around. Normally is a anti-gravity, or a gravity modification field is a better term than anti-gravity, I think. Anyway, sorry. Oh gosh, I actually got lucky. I'm sure I was never going to find it. Okay, when talking about the life energy, this here.
Oh, wow.
Okay, when I had a break in my experiences for about 12 and a half to about almost 17, okay? And then the first experience, I woke up and I was on board this craft. And I was standing down here, okay? And this thing, it has, if you can see that there, it actually, I'm sorry, it's phasing out. Anyway, it's a ball there that has these hexagons on it. And as time has gone on, it looks similar to what we would call C60 now, okay? But, you know, it took me into looking at that, why the whole thing they call the honeycomb conjecture, which is why do bees make the hexagon to store their energy? Okay, and that's what this was. And this thing is glowing. It's creating this golden energy, this golden type of light. and it's projecting up. It's got these things going around it that are moving and look like almost the Saturn's rings of Saturn. So several years later, in around 96, 97, when I saw the movie Contact with Jodie Foster, you know, they dropped her through something that had I knew immediately somebody's seen something. Anyway, the light goes up and it goes this very large black box. And this is a craft, and I'm saying this thing is large. Here, these are actually decks. And I could see some people about here going up, touching this light. And they look kind of see-through. So I wanted to go up there and see it, and all of a sudden, boom, you're up there. And that comes with an amazing amount of sickness. Talk about wanting to puke. The experience ain't going to last that long because I'm about to lose the old cookies. You know what I mean?
Is that when you saw Susan Manowich?
Exactly. She's one person I saw up there. And so did this guy that was harassing me, asking me all these questions. He quite genius gentleman, but he worked with he was with the company that was co-oping with my father's company. And he would go in and talk about these UFOs. He had these pictures. My father would be like, "Man, I'm not into that. You talk to my son," you know? And then this guy's calling, asking me a bunch of questions. I tried to act stupid, but he wasn't buying it. He kept calling. And then I got to go down and get something from my father one day. And so this guy had an office right next door. And when I see him, my goodness, he's somebody I've seen when I was 16. He's one of the people in that group. And when he saw that picture, he really tripped hard on the black box. And I try to ask questions during these experiences, but they're telepathically questions. And these beings will start, one, it's bad if you can't see some of them. Some are phased out and they're answering your question before you can formulate it telepathically and kind of send it.
Yeah.
And that to me is disconcerting. I'm sorry. It just is.
We have another question for you here. Ursa was asking, how does it feel being within the temporal fields of those eggs?
Actually, the sickness that I talked about is what they had called temporal aphasia. And the reason why that happens is because the inside and the outside of the ship are not in the same dimension. And for us to be there with somewhere where they can exist is not healthy for us. We're out of sync in that way. So being around the eggs didn't make me feel any different than just the sickness I was having in there. But I can tell you, if it answers that question, where the sickness started at. The sickness started in this room. And this is where I came in at. This is this is actually, I call this the anti-gravity room, but I really don't know what it was. This was much bigger than she illustrated here. But when I actually got levitated in there, this was the first room. And this box, this black box, it looked like it had these almost like spokes, carbon tubes or something going into the wall. And it's being held up, but it's at like a 90-degree angle or whatever. And when I look up at this thing, I started getting really dizzy, really sick. So I think this says a lot how, and this room itself was bigger than the craft I'd seen in the sky. So that takes us into that whole Doctor Who thing, interdimensional, transdimensional, and, but bottom line is it was, I think a lot of people experienced that because the ship are in two places. Something else about those eggs that I had to accept. And when I started dealing with people like Rudy Shields took an interest in a lot of my experiences, certain ones. He said, what you're dealing with is, those are beings from another universe. They were telling you different galaxies, but some that you're dealing with is a different universe. And what I'm seeing there, that egg is actually a path of coherency from their universe to where they're existing, where I can be there. Okay. And that's why a lot of those light forms weren't coming out of that egg. And it came a point where I was in a room there and I got so sick. And it's this room I call with the mother of the hybrids is what I call it. And she's standing around this machine. And I get so sick in there by the end of this that I'm about to pass out. Okay. And at that point, two of these lights came out of one of these eggs, an egg in that room, and surrounded, like one attached here, another attached like the side of my ribs. And it felt like they were changing my time field or something, because the sickness started going away. And then I was put in a room to where before I was sent back. Anyway, which is that room actually. I was sent back by that. That was a very interesting room. And now that I've talked to some divers, I can say I think it might have been similar to what we would call a hyperbaric chamber of some type before being sent back. And I think it's because of maybe some of the things that can come back with us. Anyway,
you have another question here on the thing. It says, when I dreamt of getting pulled astrally from my place in reverse through solid objects and into deep space, is that the same or similar to being abducted even though I agree to go?
yes, bilocation during the experience. Bilocation during the experience. Excellent statement. I had mentioned earlier seeing, Susan Manwich and Bill and people like that on board that craft, but they appeared to be like kind of transparent. Okay. But guess what? They're not up there holding their stomach like I am, especially if I wanted to go to be on that level. And all of a sudden I'm up there, whoop, I'm up there. Ooh, you know what I mean? But I'm trying to see what's going on and not lose that, it's kind of like when you go down on a roller coaster, you lose your stomach. It feels like that, but worse. It's like you're completely disoriented, and it gets worse with time. And then you're breathing in this stuff that smells like Windex. They're blowing you up telepathically before you can even say something. And then there's no frame of reference, so you'd be like all tripped out, man. For me, I was one of those kids. I like field trips, and when I was a kid, and they felt like field trips, but the thing is that there would be you wouldn't want to be around me in a field trip when you're a kid. What's this? What's that? What's that? I was one of those kids, talk too much. Anyway, a point being, but they were not suffering from the same sickness that I was, because they're in dream body, energy body, able to have the experience without the physicality, and the dream body, energy body doesn't, conform to any of the physical parameters of this body in physics. So a lot of times bilocation is a major part of the contact scenario. And that's what she's describing right there. And, it's really cool that she threw in that she agreed. See, not all contact is negative. And we start going into the fact that really these are conscious events. And some of these beings that are actually, people say the Akashic records. But I mentioned before, I don't know if it's on this show too, but the Akashic records are actually black holes. And the work Rudy Shields and some of the others have done on black holes, the data actually shows that. And Rudy calls them MACOs, magnetically eternally collapsing objects. And what happens is that when you have a black hole and a MACO, let's say we send something like, this rock through it, okay? When it goes through, on the surface is a perfect copy. And they call that the quantum hologram. And the MACO itself is actually the mechanism inside the black hole that stores the information. So when you have universe going through these, you have actually the space and time wrapping around that MACO. And kind of similar to the way the Akashic disk looks on a black hole. But really that's actually the MACO inside too looks similar. So we talk about the Akashic records. The records of space and time, but people can't tell you really what they are. And that's what they are. They're these black holes. And these MACOs operate like brain waves, similar to what we call in our brains. They occur like what they call unconscious waves, and they occur spherical, okay? And we have actually in our brains something called, in our bodies, microtubules. And for what we're talking about here, was relegated to the brain, the microtubules of the brain, which are actually spherical, okay? They can occur somewhere here, helical and spherical, but they're spherical, okay? So they're able to actually access the MACOs on that level through the speed of thought, which is beyond warp anything we could ever want. You know what I mean? That's kind of, so when dealing with the civilization, that, when they start talking about civilization type 3, type 4, and these civilizations that actually can move stars and make stars, and they're using the fabric of space, the fabric of the MACOs themselves as a prime power source, they're likely so advanced that they're no longer in existence as we know it, but they would still exist within the Mako, within the Akashic records, and they can still make contact with us through not the divine field and other thing, but through the divine field and our brain waves. And that's what a lot of people are doing right now, and that's what's happening, you know.
Yeah.
But the problem is, we deal with so much inundation and brain entrainment concerning negative encounters, that when we start having experience like that, you may have beings coming from the divine field, but you've been so brain entrained with negative encounters that we're strong enough to start warping our reality into that. I think that's something we need to really look at when we start dealing with the contact experience. Not saying that the negative stuff doesn't happen. When you look at the body of work that CCRI did, Ray Hernandez's Conscious Research Institute, used to be Freed Foundation for Extraterrestrial Encounters, Edgar Mitchell, but they put out a really good survey, and thousands of experiencers took it around the world. And you would think that most of it would be like negative encounters on the scale. How was your encounter? But the negative part is minor compared to the positive and the neutral. That's just isn't what you would think to see, because that's not what we're showed in the media.
That's right. Yeah. Hey, Barry, we got a question from Anne. What do you think about different planes of reality? She had a dream. Everything was the same, but there was no people, and it was all in black and white. And she said 2 necklaces joined together and transported me there. What type of experience?
When we experience another dimension or another reality, since we're beings of perception, it's in like a dream type of a fashion. So that makes absolute sense to me. I mentioned my older brother before. He astral projects. He's a musician too, and for me, I had to really try to work at that to get it. Not really the thing I dig a lot, but I mean, it was something I had to work at to try to make it happen. I couldn't just do it like he would say. When I'm tired, sometimes after a gig, man, I hear this, and I just go with it, and all of a sudden, boom, take off. And I was like, whoa, he's seen some interesting things, such as what we would call the mansion worlds, which appear to be crystal palaces. After crystal palace, that comes mansion worlds after the death process. So very interesting. We start looking at that. Hopefully I answered their question, I hope, but I agree with what they were saying. And I think that that's definitely, and I hope I answered the bilocation thing also. The other person is dealing with bilocation. I think that's fairly common. Another way to know that this personal experience, after dealing with the experience with bilocation, afterwards I'd be wiped out. Something about that technology seems to make you really tired.
Yeah. Oh, here we have another question here for you. Is it possible to opt out of these experiences even if they're positive?
Yeah. I mean, something that's important is when not just dealing with these experiences, whether ET experiences or whatever, but when dealing with negative inorganic beings, whatever we want to call them, apparitions, demons, whatever, even earthbound spirits that jump us and join with us and stay with us our whole life, and we don't know it. And they express themselves with negative behavior patterns in the person that they're kind of possessing and attached to. Okay, so something to kind of keep that we're not told enough is the ability to intent our will of intent. How do we intend our will? And when doing that, a major way is it's through our imagination. You two both were gracious enough to do a lot of work with me. And, like, for example, when dealing with the negative self and the negative identities, dissolving them, it's done a great deal through the imagination, because the brain actually uses pictures and feeds that to the soul. You know what I mean? And we've got 4 components. We've got mind, body, spirit, and negative self. And that negative self, so much of our energy is tied up in that. Saying bad things to ourselves, not believing in ourselves, it fosters down here. Then you meet these traumas and it fractures into negative identities. The consciousness comes up and grabs them, and subconscious does, and puts them in the back, and they're running like these damn programs. This thing says, oh, these apps are asleep. No, they're not. This phone is getting hot. It's swole. It's not. It's the same thing with those negative identities and the negative self. And then you got these negative entities that just pour grease on the fire. Not all of our thoughts are our own. Not all the voices we hear are our own, but they sound like they're in ours. So we think they are. And so, and it's wondering, like, for example, Lisa, I had mentioned something to last time I saw our friend Soretta, or actually we had a show, and I mentioned, often don't we wonder why people aren't magical? We have the cognitive ability, we have the energy. Why are we not kind of magical? Why are we so beast-like? That's the mind of the predator. That's the mind of these inorganic beings. You sit with somebody that's a millionaire, and when you sit there and watch them eat, they're like the food is just going to be gone. You're looking around, like, man, you can get as much food as they can possibly need, But that's the mind of the predator. The predator's always worried about being discovered, always worrying that there's not enough food. You know what I mean? That's just food for thought on that, and that's a way that they keep us controlled.
I think I said too. I might have even said it in my book, but I think, our imagination is our superpower, and it's how we create. And, if you come from a place where you are recognizing that you have the ability through your imagination to create it. And I was telling him, there probably was a time when people would be considered to be what we would consider magic now, because they could create something in real time, utilizing those tools. But we've been taught, if you really wanted to control an entire group of people, and you didn't want them to co-create and create something that they would flourish in, because you wanted them to create what you would flourish in, you would say to them that imagination is child's play. It's stupid. That's not, you want to stay in analytical mind, and you want to think things through, and, going to school and doing all of those things. And you would kind of shut those things down, because, otherwise people would realize and recognize that they can create whatever it is that they wanted to create. So I think that's I think it's a real thing. And if we would all stop looking at our imagination as something that's child's play, we would recognize the fact that it's our superpower, and it's how we co-create right now. Life and the world would look really different really quick.
When looking, for example, I have no religion, but spiritually, but I definitely believe in a prime creator. I've had experiences. But when we look at the prime creator, which is hard because we're beings made up of beginning and endings. So to think of something that has no beginning and ending is already hard. Okay.
Yeah.
But being omnipotent and omnipresent, the one reason that the cosmos would have been created, whether you want to think it's through the singularity or through the Big Bang, hey, whatever. But the bottom line, the reason why the creator would have done creation is loneliness. Ultimate problem, loneliness. And then us being parts of the creator, made in quote unquote, or people say God's image, really that means that the creator created the cosmos, and all those that did it was through imagination. And the creative principle passes through us as immortal souls. That's our imagination. It's a shame that kids are told, unless you're like an artist of a certain type, most kids are told, how many kids, I guarantee there's like more than half of your audience, I bet you, had imaginary friends when they were young. And then somewhere around the age of, after 5, you stop seeing them, especially after your parents or your older brothers might say, you don't say, you're crazy. I'm going to say you're crazy. So all of a sudden you don't see them anymore, or somebody, I was talking to someone recently, I did have an imaginary friend, but they would come out of the closet. Yeah. A lot of times those ghosts will hang out in the closet. There's something called the Casimir effect, almost like it's an orgone box generating free energy, and then they get enough to manifest more out here once they come out of the closet. So, it's things like that, but people are trained to forget about all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Barry, so Anne has a question, another one. It says, how do you explain sleep paralysis? I slept in a new space and left a spirit trying to invade me, if that makes sense. I screamed for them to go away and eventually woke up. They went away.
It sounds like an incubus or a succubus. And those are the inorganic beings that attack us when we're in sleep, and it causes paralysis. They're normally of a sexual connotation. I believe that It's the incubus that attacks females and the succubus that attacks males, I think, or vice versa. But either way, that sounds very much like one of the. And there are other beings that even earthbound spirits, if you're in a haunted place, they'll try to do some sleep paralysis on you at night, especially if they're hostile ones. You know.
Mm.
Yeah. I think that it's funny because when you're in the community and you're listening to people and having stories, and it's all good to hear it and try to decipher, what it is. But I'm always struck by, the differences. Listen, knock on wood, I feel pretty happy that the majority of my experiences are not negative. I mean, I've seen a couple of things that I'm kind of like, what the hell, and like giving them the boot. But for the most part, the majority of it, very positive for me, very positive interactions, loving, even I would say loving interactions. But it's interesting how there are people that are, experiencing things, and it's like this negative thing after this negative thing after this negative thing. And, I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. I mean, like I said, I feel happy that, I don't have a lot of those things, because I think it would be really, really scary. But you also feel, I don't know, bad for those people. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you a question now. So have you got a little bit of flack community-wise for saying that you've had positive contact? Positive experience?
I haven't gotten flack, I wouldn't say, but what I would say is that a lot of times, I'm going to say more than half of the time, people have told me that I probably don't have all my memories back yet. And people will tell me that they're sure I'm going to uncover and I should go to QHHT, or I should do something to unlock these other layers that I'm missing somehow. I get a lot of that. I've also noticed, though, and I think, there's something too, if there's soul contracts and all of these things like we're talking about, that could be possibilities in this community. Maybe that's not my role this time, is to have to kind of deal with some of those things. I don't know, because, if I do have something negative, like I said, have come up into my field, I'm going to be honest, I don't have a really hard time clearing it. I get very serious. I get very and I don't, a lot of times I don't have to call in like a bunch of stuff. I have before. It's not that I don't call in anything. I have, but a lot of times, most times, I'm going to say that I can do it myself, and it's not really, really difficult. So, but like I said, maybe because I decided in this incarnation that this was not something that was going to plague me, or that was going to be my role. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm gonna throw this out. I don't want to get tomatoes thrown at me or carrots, whatever they do with the Apollo. But what if that whole thing, we're being told soul contracts, this and that? What if all that's BS? And it's BS coming from people that have not done the work. Okay, they're not really mediums. They've not had NDEs. They're doing what other people are saying. Okay, and that's come from somebody, like for example, and I'll give a saying, like these people, this campaign against the light. It's a soul trap. It's a reincarnation trap. I do not consent. All these different things they say, and these are people that have never done a past life regression. I've done several of them, and look, I've asked questions, and like for example, okay, there's different modalities of past life regression. There's one that's called life between lives. Okay. And what you do when you go back to young, and it's the last incarnation. A lot of times people they'll describe what it's like before because they'll start talking about what's being in the womb, where they were before they got to the womb, and then the life before that. All right. And then you'll go through the death process, or even the other modalities. When you go through the death process, I've encountered again and again, is that the individual will encounter a guide. The guide could be whatever, a person, I've had a Sasquatch come over, different things, but normally it's a person. They'll come get the client and take them to a place. And it can be, I call it the place of translation and reconfiguration, because it can be a library, a study, a nature spot. It just varies. You know, in the library, there'll be these books, and it's a different life that they've had. They'll pull out one book, and it's this lifetime, and they'll start going through what they call a panoramic, what they call an NDE or death experience, a panoramic life review. But it's really the intent of the choices they made and how they impacted those people. It's so much stronger than we think. Okay, and then I'll ask after that's done, and never once when the guide comes do I have to say, you know, I make sure I don't do QHHT. All right, no offense to those people, but just I do something different. And you know, I don't have to say something leading like, hey, is your guide there yet? If you do the process right, they just automatically come. And then during the time before they go for reincarnation, you know, at this place of translation and reconfiguration, when they get done going through this life and have the impact and all that, there'll be these other souls that are at this place. And I've gotten different numbers, okay? Sometimes 22, 17, 12, different numbers. But these souls, they always say, you know, these souls, we incarnate together and we help each other. And I asked, I've never got the word contract. And I'll ask, I'll say, you know what, is it forced? No. It's a choice. We're helping each other. And sadly, I hate to say it, and I can even trace who these people are in different lifetimes, including this one. All right. And sadly, sometimes it's those people that screw you over lifetime after lifetime. So you might be over there blissed out. And you say, hey, buddy, I need you to screw me over real hard lifetime after lifetime so I get it. Another person, hey, B, no problem. I got you.
You know, honestly, with you saying that, truthfully, I think you're right. And I think that I prefaced things the way that I did because I'm trying not to discount what other people are saying or trying to be more politically correct and not step on toes of what it is that other people are coming out and they're saying. But if I'm going to be truthful with myself and I'm going to say that I think that what you're saying is probably more accurate. And I think that it's not, you know, it's difficult because you don't want to discount anybody else's thing. Listen, if I heard my story 6 years ago, because, you know, mine happened during, you know, the like 2020, really. It started a little bit in 2017, but really revved up in 2020. If somebody would have told me my stuff, I would have thought drugs, schizophrenic or something, or completely off their rocker nut job, right? And this stuff is truth. This is my experience. This is the stuff that I have seen. So I always have to factor that in because I feel like just because it's not my experience, maybe it's not somebody else's, but you also have to factor in this information attracts some people that, you know, listen, some of them could have a screw loose. I'm sorry. It's you know, this kind of information and this kind of stuff, there are a lot of very real experiences and things that happen, but there are also some that it's maybe questionable.
Also, see what I thought when I heard this whole side of it is I have an open mind, so I'll listen to different things. I'll see what resonates with me. And I necessarily don't have to blow it out of the water to make someone feel, you know, feel whatever type of way they want to feel, or they can feel however they want. I think it's more people need to feel a certain way to get through this life. They have to justify why stuff is being done to them, why they can't handle certain things, or why they are going down a certain path. And so if there's nothing to justify it, that means you have to look in the mirror and take accountability on why stuff is messed up, right? Why am I going down this path and every turn I make, I'm crashing into a wall? Oh, it's because someone has a contract. We did a soul contract because they love me so much. They chose to be the asshole of my life, right? And make everything difficult for me, right? And so so really, this person really isn't an asshole. This is my brother. This is a great, and it's like, no, that's someone you should be staying away from, and maybe you have to make some different decisions, right? And take accountability. for what you're doing, because I think that's how you truly grow throughout the life. Is you make you're where you're at because of the specific decisions you make, not because of somebody else, but because of what decisions you're making. And this goes for me too, goes for everybody. When if you're in a great situation, God bless you, you made some great decisions. If you're in a bad situation, you made some poor ones. But when you could come to that reality and say, this is on me, right? And own it. Although right in the beginning, you may feel like a schmuck that you made a bad decision, right? You may feel like you let your wife down or your kids down, and it's a horrible feeling, but it's a feeling you need to go through because it is liberating once you go through it, knowing that you have sovereignty and control over your own damn life, and it's not someone else. It's just, you know, it really is. So you got to go through that short-term discomfort to get that long-term, that long-term success.
He got all fired up there.
Yeah.
You know what? I'll tell you what. It's so cool to hear you say that, because we did a bunch of work. You went through like all your negative identities and dissolved them all. And you know what's hard about that for a lot of people is it shows it's the decisions that we make during the trauma that creates them, and they're never good. I mean, we go through trauma and they walk around like trauma walks around like member of the population here. But then when we start doing that with the negative identities, we see that we actually create them, and it gives us we have to be accountable and responsibility. Some people know they'll do one or two of them, they won't do no more.
You were talking for 3 hours.
But you know, it is liberating. And then, and, you know, and just for the record, I say, because I've asked people, you know, I'll say like one person of the clients I've had, one person use the word contract, and I said, so it's forced, and they start, no. I said, well, what is that the right word? They said, no, this is something we agreed, you know, or for example, when somebody says they're about to reincarnate at this place, or they're going to go here and reincarnate, I say, oh, what is your guide making you do it? And they'll be sitting, you know, hypnosis is really all relaxation. They said, they get to look on their face like, no, like I'm just an idiot for even asking. You know what I mean? Yeah. I said, oh, well, your guide make you do it? No. Is the light making you do it? No, it's my choice. And so I'm not saying the other doesn't happen, but I have yet to encounter it in many sessions. All right. So it's not the norm. And I think that when we start getting these soul trap and these ways that they track people, it's after we incarnate. And then they start doing things, this neural weaponry and all sorts of other things, possession, attacked by negative inorganic beings. It goes through the gamut. All right. But I think it's not a natural part of our processes when we incarnate deep and, you know, die and things. And something else, people say that, you know, they worried very much. Okay, when going about this soul trap and it erases your soul life memories. Okay. Now, when dealing with that concept, all right, there's two things I'll say. I've done a video on this. There's this book here that is from Ray Hernandez and the CCRI Foundation. It's called The Mind of God. Okay. And what this does and takes us into not just philosophy, but a lot of the survey that they handed out also, what people are saying, is that at the point of death, we go to this, the mind of God is this repository that we go to at death that actually takes our life memories, wipes us clean, and sends us back. Okay? Now, when dealing with, sorry, I have one of his books in here. Carlos Castaneda, those that are familiar with him, okay, and there's a book that one of his, it's The Eagle's Gift, okay, and his teacher, his Toltec teacher, starts describing that the universe, the Toltec said, was shaped like a giant eagle, and that at the point of death, we go in through the beak of the eagle, and it wipes our life memories clean. Now, what starts being dealing with in Castaneda was dealing with techniques that they call recapitulation, that is actually reliving all your memories and all the energy you've left with others and in every situation you've been in, recreating that and taking that energy back, okay, through a breathing technique as you're actually using your creative visualization. Then when the death process hits you, okay, you go through the beak of the eagle, go to the mind of God. It takes the recapitalization, the recap, and leaves your soul mind, your soul experiences intact. And, you know, something else I've been talking about, which is the ISIS thesis. And that is June Kay King created that, and she's quite genius. But she's saying that when dealing with the body and what we call junk DNA, you look up scientifically, it's actually mostly viral. Our junk DNA is mostly viral and bacterial, but mostly viral. And that we have some of that bacteria is called, some of it is actually, we think viruses, but some of it is actually called phage. Okay, the phage lambda. And the phage lambda, what it is actually like a positive bacteria, positive virus, similar to some of like, like we have positive actually gut bacteria too. But this is a positive bacteria that actually takes over. And what it does is injects, viruses reproduce in a thing called the lysogenic, which means that the virus will actually inject itself into the host, into the cell, and it will go dormant though in lysogenic. But in lystic, it actually expands and blows up within the cell and reproduces itself. So this lambda phage is actually what, oh gosh, I forgot what they call that bacteria now. Not luminous bacteria. Anyway, it has the ability to work with light, especially when exposed to ultraviolet rays. And what she was saying is that the pharaohs were trying to actually use the mummification process to give the phage lambda a chance to actually go into lystic, and in that way you stay conscious during the death process. And it deals with some other things. That's one of the things that tells you to turn away from the light and do the Egyptian process or stances and things like that. But nonetheless, it's a way of supposedly retaining your memory, your life memories during the death process. And I think that's what this is really about. And just to maybe come from a possible positive aspect. All right. We talked about earlier, Lisa, you mentioned the creative principle, how that passes through us. Okay. How we're part of the creator in that way. And that means that our superconscious, our divine overself, higher self, whatever people want to call it. It's so cheesy in a moment. But anyway, it's still in perfection with the creator. Okay. And it knows everything. It knows that every possible quantum outcome, every possible quantum possibility of everything. So there's nothing left. And our ultimate challenge, our ultimate adversary would be what? Boredom. Again. And and so the only choice we have is to kind of wipe ourselves clean and then relearn everything. And if you both like Star Trek, there was a Star Trek Voyager where you had a Q that was trying to commit suicide, and the other Q that we're so familiar with shows up and say, "Oh, he's crazy," and to defend this, the Black Spock, Tuvok, he's a defender, brother. That's a hard role. He did pretty good, I thought. But anyway, but they take them to the continuum to show why this Q wants to kill itself. When they go to the continuum, it's this gas station with like an old dog outside, a few people standing around it, one playing a pinball, and just that's it. And she's like, "This is the continuum?" Janeway was. And he says, "Yeah, this is it." And they said, "What's with the road?" There's a big road. She goes, "Well, the road, it goes to the end of the cosmos, the back and forth. We've all been all down that road, and we've all been everything at the gas station." And the one goes, "I've even been the dog." The other Q goes, "We've all been the dog. I've been the newspaper too." And he's saying, "You notice nobody's saying anything." They go, "Yeah." He said, "There's nothing left to say.
Interesting.
We've experienced everything."
Right.
And as immortal souls, I think maybe that's what we're going against. Real quick, and I'll shut up. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk so much, y'all.
No,
Going into something like like Tibetan Book of the Dead, okay? And when it talks about actually the first part of the bardo, which is the different levels we can go to after death, and how the first thing we encounter is all the negative karma, the negative energy we put out, that comes back and hits us a millionfold. And that's enough to scare people back into an incarnation here or levels even lower, And then they talk about the second part too, the people that are really these good people, making the good choices, loving people. that when they get hit a millionfold with all the love they put out, comes back and hits them a millionfold. And then what can happen is the one that I had kind of described it as these gods on this beach with the most beautiful scenery you could ever see. And for me, it would mean I have the ladies with the blue drinks and the little naked ladies with the blue drinks bringing it to me all the time. Whatever, you know. But I mean, the best thing, just kidding around, you. But the most beautiful, the most beautiful scenery you could ever see, with everything you wanted, you could ever need being brought to you. So at that point, where does your volition go to go directly to prime creator source? You lose that volition and kind of just become stagnant on that beach.
Yeah.
That's something else we have to be careful of, how we can get blissed out by our own karma. Food for thought.
A couple things with that too, but really quick, I have a couple of questions here.
Sure.
Before I do, I just have somebody asking me about my my readings and stuff. I just want to show you really quick my my website here. So you go here, and this is where I don't know why it's kind of lagging, but this is where you would book one of the sessions with me, and we do it over Google Meet. But if you want to record it, then I can give you another link, because for some reason on this one I don't do that. And really quick, this is my book, and then I want to show you John's book as well. Sorry, I have to always like undo and redo.
You clicked your book off kind of quick. I didn't get to really see it.
Oh, I'll go back. Thank you. Show you Johnny's book really quick. So Johnny wrote a book, and it's the frequency formula about the Grabovoi codes. It's really interesting. Yeah. He's no nonsense. So there's no fluff in his book. It's like he tells you, right?
Yeah, I just thought I mostly I wanted to make sure I put more codes than I've seen out there. So there's like over 600 codes I put in there. Grabovoi was a mathematician, and the universe, numbers are a big deal, geometry, musical notes, stuff like that. But he dealt with these, and what this does, it really puts a fine point on if you're looking especially when you're meditating,
manifesting.
To manifest. It really puts like a fine point on the spear to really help, and we've got some great feedback. But yeah, I don't like all the fluff and writing a bunch of bullshit in there, so people think they got a bigger book for them. I wanted to put how do you actually do it? What's the best way for success to do it? What gives you the best chance of success, and how to work and do it through the process that's been working for me and worked for some of the people that have done it. So that's kind of why I wrote the book. It's a little bit shorter, but it's right to the point.
Yeah. And then this is my book, and you can get that on Amazon. Both of them are on Amazon, or you can do it on Kindle. So thank you for that. And this is basically just my story. And also I have in there some of my journal entries as I was going through this process of kind of figuring all this out, because I'm going from like conservative Catholic who's not into like, I watched Star Wars, as a movie when I was a kid, but that stuff lived in sci-fi for me. So there was no, even I wasn't into fairies. I wasn't into any of that stuff. So this was like crazy for me, but you did have a couple of questions from one of our viewers. So I just wanted to make sure that we hit those. Here's the
questions
one.
Or carrots or onions. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. They're asking about your hypnosis. And so they were saying, does this mean that you need to have a certain vibration to have hypnosis or regression, or can anyone do it?
Anyone can do it. Really, sadly, it's TV gives hypnosis a bad reputation. Like there's this guy over home saying, "You're under my power," but it's just relaxation. And the people I found that really have a hard time with it are something that's called infantation, which is where they can't create images in their mind. People that have really hard time doing that. That's a little bit difficult, but unless you have that, otherwise anyone can do it. It's just a matter of relaxing. I actually became a hypnotist and learned it because I was strictly trying to hypnotize myself for all these missing time I had. And then I learned I could put other people just like that, in trance, but I couldn't do it to myself. So I had to go sit down, let somebody else do me. You know why? Because I'm all stressed out, brother, and I'm all control freak, and I couldn't let go. So the point was, I didn't really want to be hypnotized. So I really, really conformed. It was very difficult. You know what I mean? It took like 35 minutes to get me under because I was sitting up there tripped out. Once I went with the process, I realized something like you both would, you have more control than ever. It's weird. Although the body may be like this kind of laid back, but the mind is on point. The spirit is on point. Yeah.
And it's fast. It's fast.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like you just turned something up and all of a sudden everything's moving like really, really fast. Here's another question for you. How do you prevent relearning the same lesson over and over again if you have no memory?
See, that's the problem. That's the problem. That's a little kind of, that's why in death, I would say that the recapitulation or the ISIS method, but especially the recap, is that hidden clause in that contract. You know what I mean? Of how we can actually remember some of these things. And, and it's a shame to me. And I think that says a lot about where we are now, because you both know when you were in contact with your superconscious, whatever we want to call it, you had all these answers. You knew them all. And then when we emerge, we're not there quite anymore. And it makes it wonder why we're not like that all the time. The last client I had a few days ago, it was one of those deals where they were really deep. And it took me 8 times, about 6-7 minutes to emerge them. Okay. And then they get done, they're looking at me. I don't think it worked. When I show them 5 minutes, it takes me to merge them 7-8 minutes. And they go, but I wasn't asleep. No. But they look like this, Almost what we call a flopper. Means they flop off the chair or their couch, fall on the floor. But it's not about that. It's just relaxation. So hopefully that answers that person's question. But I'm sure you probably be able to, especially if you want to experience it and experience the relaxation. Yeah, you can undergo a regression or a number of other services that can be done.
Yeah, that was interesting to me when me and you did our session. I thought I was going to be like sleeping with my hand up like this.
Oh,
because you ever see them in the show? It's like they have their hand up, and it's like now you can, and then you start barking like a dog or do some weird shit. But with Barry, it was more like just relaxing, and I was doing the same thing. I realized I was like down in my chair like this, and I was like I had to keep going like. I couldn't get me back up, but I was so relaxed. But it's true. It was very relaxing. What is that Barry is. He builds a trust. I don't know how you do it, but you have to trust somebody as well to be relaxed and let yourself go a little bit, because otherwise I would have been guarded and I would have not felt. I just wouldn't have relaxed.
I agree with you. We've had a couple of people that have offered us to experience their work and stuff before, but it really is about that, finding that person that you can feel comfortable with enough to completely relax into it and just have that trust that that they're going to guide you into something, because it's a vulnerable state on some level. So I highly recommend you, Barry, and I send people to you because I found that experience to be helpful, very, very helpful, but also comfortable. And I think it's really the most important aspect of it. So we love you, Barry, in our house. You know that. We think you're awesome.
I'd say you both did great work, and so much information came out of both your sessions. Each one of them that we all did together. It was really good. It's a pleasure working with you both, definitely. And and that's what it's all about. It's like we can go to somebody and get a reading, and it's cool. It may help a little bit, but what does it really do to help and change your daily life? And the same goes with hypnosis too. These sessions are made to really help our lives. You know what I mean? Who are we? What are we? And with the negative identities, a person doesn't even have to be hypnotized to do those. But then again, it's using the imagination again.
Yeah, and you want to know, Barry? One of the things I do in the book, and I talk about it, and when I tell people about it, when I do the Grabovoi codes, when I'm imagining it, I do what we did together. when I make the codes bigger and bigger and bigger, and that feeling starts to intensify because that's what, and what those codes are. But it's such a powerful image in my head. But I use those same things as how we crush those negative entities. How you go through your process is incredible. And so it's some of the things that I use all the time now for myself, and when I meditate, and it's just, I think it's extremely powerful.
John, I have a question. So how much do you think those codes different codes are tied into the holographic principle? Pretty serious, you think?
I would think that they would be, because to me, the way that I visualize it when I was looking at them was like coordinates.
Right.
I don't know. It really felt like that, because you're literally telling the universe, there's very specific number combinations, which people know because they talk about those. They talk about angel numbers, or they talk about, the Fibonacci codes and things like that. But you're literally putting it together, a sequence of numbers that it feels like a coordinate, right? So if you're looking at it with school, like the paper, where you have the coordinates there, positive, 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 negative, 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 positive, and if you're trying to get from here to here, it's almost like dialing it in and saying, and not only that, but it's specific to that thing that you're wanting to accomplish. So it's almost like telling the universe exactly, not in some kind of, and what was weird is we did the first one and then the second one, and then we got up to like 5 and it was working. We were looking at each other like, are you effing kidding me right now?
Yeah.
Like, it was really work. I mean, you have to buy in. Like, you can't do this half-ass. Like anything, right? You have to really be committed to it. But
I just look, I look at it like, I do think numbers are tied in, and I love numbers, so it was right up my alley.
Yeah.
So I love number stuff and moving numbers around. I love that stuff. But I look at it, if you can keep yourself in how you're supposed to do the process, if you can keep yourself in that positive vein of affirming what you want, and you having that attitude like you already have it, and then when you're going in, you're making it just larger than life. You're building, those numbers are glowing, and you're making them bigger and bigger, and that's where you're moving toward. I just think that what starts to happen is you start that again, that's what puts the tip on that meditation, where if you want to start to manifest a different type of life, or whatever area you're looking for, it really starts to bring you down that vein. Because again, if you don't think you can co-create your life, then life just happens to you, and then you got to deal with all the stuff that happens. You know what I mean? Instead of being a co-creator.
That sounds like a great way to manifest. A wonderful way to manifest and to intend will also. Another technique, super, super important. We think about things like, for example, like when dealing with Sasquatch and that book, and I talked about on one of Jessica's show that I killed the 8 men of Mount St. Helens, the guy that 8 Canyon thing. That guy that shot them, one of them, he kept saying, that they kept talking about the supernatural, and how he kept calling them manifested beings. How he thought that they didn't manifest until people were actually a lot near, and they're kind of using our morphogenic field to do it. So I mean, it's really interesting, but people don't want to talk about that and say that there's that other compartment.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes sense, right?
What's that?
I think I said it absolutely. I think it makes sense. You're right that you don't hear people pulling that thread all the way through that way, but I mean, it completely makes sense. But another question for you too: are there any supplements that would actually help clear the mind from from brain, etc.?
Brain fog.
I think brain fog. Yeah.
One, I would say GABA helps a bit. GABA and also SAMe, SAME, and those are natural. You can get those at even like a Walmart. You know what I mean? So those are ones I think help as far as natural stuff goes. I'm not one that I've not needed things like melatonin or anything like that. I'm not into that. But as far as like GABA and just things that would maybe help clear the mind itself, and just actually sitting for a couple minutes in silence and try to actually do what's called stopping your internal dialogue. which means stop talking when we're not talking to ourselves. Stop talking to ourselves. When we do that, we actually start becoming multidimensional. So that means like focusing, like in a meditation, like for me, I'll focus on the prime creator, and that's like it, nothing else. And then try to stop my internal dialogue. And then that's when things start really changing and gives us the ability to focus our will of intent even more. Because that's when you can access, again, the imagination. The imagination is very powerful. And I think we're going to come to more and more realization of that and how much that structures of what we are. You know?
Yeah, and Barry, I was going to mention to you too,
What's up, Emma?
to kind of answer their question as well. What do you think about parasite cleanses? Because I've tried them and I feel like they do help. And I know parasites we're all kind of infested with it. So I feel like that definitely plays a factor into it. So I'm just curious to see your thoughts on doing that.
That's a good one too. You know, cleansing, and also techniques. You know, there are several different techniques to keep ourselves clean. You know what I mean? But one of them is the intent of will, like I said before. But the other is actually physical cleanses you can do, and those some types of sagings and things like that. They do work. You know. I think basically it's a toolbox, Emma. So build your toolbox and use them all. I mean, because we've got, this place is just filled with, you know, when dealing with Earth, we've got two Earths, not just the physical one we have here that are beings like us with consciousness and body, awareness and body. You've got the other Earth here that's vibrational different, where we have actually inorganic beings, non-physical beings with consciousness and awareness. And on that Earth, you have beings that jump into the field of awareness on Earth all the time, whether you want to call them extraterrestrials, interdimensionals, whatever, but it happens all the time. And we're just unaware of it. It's the same premises when you're actually dreaming. You know, when you go through these gates, there are these gates of dreaming. Like I had problems with some of them. The first one is you look at your hands. The second one is you start shifting your gaze around. Okay, and these are things that actually shift our cognitive ability into the dream body. But when you get done going through all those gates, like the last one is you see yourself there sitting there dreaming or sleep, which means you're bilocating. Okay, something we talked about earlier in the dream or in the contact experience, but this is actually a dream technique. And you do this bilocation. But then when you get past that, the last point is you realize that you're actually existing consciously and perceiving an electron impulse. And once you wipe away all the phantasmagorical images, how many energy generating beings are in your field of awareness then, besides yourself? Those are the ones that mask themselves as odd objects or odd things that don't go cohesively in our dreams, or the worst ones, they show up as people we love in our dreams and they torment you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting point too. And it's funny because, you know, when you start making yourself dial in and stay in that awareness of things like you were talking about, where you silence that inner dialogue, but even in your walking, waking life, as you start realizing you're kind of on a hamster wheel or you're going into this automatic kind of space, it's funny when you start doing that in meditation, you'll start doing that in life. And when you start quieting yourself down and doing that, you become aware, right, of so many more energies and stuff that are in your field or that you're brushing up against. And it's a really interesting world to kind of just step back a little bit, zoom out, and just observe all of the things that are kind of coming into your field all the time that you can, if you're on automatic pilot, you're oblivious to.
I mean, it's so hard just to pay our bills, go to school, raise kids. All this stuff is so difficult that all of our free energy is consumed in maintaining that. And we have very little free energy for cognitive perception on the left side of awareness, where dreams are, where death is, you know, where a lot of these contact experiences are, whether it be cryptid, ETs, or whatever. A lot of that happens on the left side of awareness, you know, so I'd agree.
This was such an interesting conversation. Thank you so much for coming back and talking. We love having you here. It's so interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks for having me.
I'm happy you came on. I was very excited when she told me that we were going to have you. I couldn't wait for the 23rd.
Thank you.
But, we hope you have we want to have you back soon too, Barry, sooner than later, because there's so much more I want to talk to you about. But we can go on for hours. And
I'd be honored. I consider you all a real light in this community. Okay, I like the area you come from. You're very open. You're dealing with the positive, not just the negative. I really like that. And plus, we did really good work together. You know, and I like that. So I know you're really good people. So.
Oh, thank you, Barry.
Yeah,
we feel the same way about you, and we're just so happy that you came to spend some time with us. So before we go, I just want to show everyone your page so they know where to find you on YouTube. I know most people know who you are. It's not, something that people don't know, but there's so much good stuff here.
Yeah.
If you haven't gone through it, the stuff that he's done with Jessica, one of these days we got to get you and Jessica on here. You have so many good videos that I have questions. I have so much more stuff that I want to ask you guys about with those. It'll be hard. I'll have to pick like 3 or 4 or something that we have
like the remote viewing ones.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love you get the best topics for her, and then she gets the most amazing. So she's incredible.
Good. She's really good at that.
She's incredible, and you two together. I love your shows. If I can catch them live, I always try to sit there and I got my popcorn. I'm sitting there with you guys. So yeah,
hey, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So everyone, thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we'll have Barry back soon, our good friend. And thank you to everyone. And Em, thanks for dropping in.
Thanks for having me again.
She's always invited to come in. Most of the time she's tired after work and she's like, but this time she had to come down.
I have to see Barry. I can't miss it.
Thank you. It's good to see you too.
Thank you.
All right, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye. Take care.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Love everybody. Oops, I clicked the wrong thing. Sorry.